And welcome to another edition of DT Live. This is going to be Ask DT. You guys, I'm going to interact with you guys here in the YouTube chat. And if you got some questions or comments, feel free. I don't really have any topics planned for today, so wherever the discussion goes is where it goes. I have my cup of coffee here. And other than that, I'm going to open the discussion up to you guys. So we have quite a few people already hanging out in the YouTube chat. I didn't give you guys much of a heads up on this. I just planned to do this stream about an hour ago. I decided I was going to stream and give you guys about an hour's notice on this. So it may take a few people a while to get the notifications. The YouTube notification system, unfortunately, kind of sucks. Shocker, right? Let me get back to some of the comments from some of the folks that were here early. Why is the Emacs terminal emulator faster than termoned? Termoned launches fine on my system. I haven't noticed it launching slow. It definitely launches faster than Emacs. So the terminal emulator in Emacs is probably fast because you already have Emacs open. So launching a terminal inside Emacs is probably quite fast. But launching Emacs itself, right, takes a couple of seconds. So I wouldn't launch Emacs just to use a terminal. If I'm already in Emacs, yeah, that's fine. But I'm not going out of my way to to use a terminal in Emacs if I just need a terminal. But if you actually want to see termoned on my system, I haven't actually launched it in a while, but I mean, it launches almost instantly. When I hit enter, you know, it launches. So I'm not sure what the problem on your system might be there. And it's strange. I haven't noticed any issues with speed on it. The only thing preventing me from using termoned as my terminal emulator of choice, especially inside Exmonet, since it's a Haskell program and everything, the problem with termoned is you can't actually pass on other arguments to it. Like other emulators, other terminal emulators, you can do something like st space -e and then name of command, htop, for example, and it will launch the st terminal and then launch htop in it. You can't do those kinds of arguments with termoned. They haven't added that functionality, and until they do, it would be hard for me to use termoned inside my tiling window managers because so many of my programs that I use on a daily basis, on a regular basis, are terminal-based programs, and if I can't actually launch those programs in termoned with just a key binding, then I can't really, switch to that particular terminal emulator. But other than that, it's a pretty fantastic terminal emulator. It renders Unicode characters very well, emojis, and I haven't noticed any speed problems with it. So that's some of the other early questions here. Let's see. Yeah, title is already hilarious. I was just trying to be real with the title. You might get an answer, you might not. Matter of fact, I'm already skipping some of the more asinine stuff here. All right. So, yeah, DT, I have my coffee ready. You can start now. I'm way ahead of you there, Felipe. I definitely needed some caffeine. That's actually my first cup of coffee today, and it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon here, and I'm a coffee drinker. The fact that I've been up since about 9 a.m. this morning, and this is my first cup of coffee. That's unusual for me. So, all right. I missed some of the chat. I skipped ahead here. Sorry, guys. YouTube notification worked perfectly on the phone. I've noticed, actually, on my phone, I typically get the notifications. On the desktop, I typically don't. I've noticed that with my subscriptions as well. Let's see. Do you use Vanilla Arch? I am not on Vanilla Arch at the moment. No, I'm using Arco Linux. Have I used Vanilla Arch? Of course. I've used a ton of different Linux distributions. Most of the ones that people know. I've probably installed them at one time or another. So, welcome to the channel, by the way. So I'm assuming you're new. All right. Sam is asking, here goes. Exmonet, need different Exmo bars on different screens. How do you do that? Well, exactly the way I do it. Go grab my Exmonet config and take a look at it, and go take a look at my Xmobar configs. So let me pull up a terminal here. Give me just a second, or a browser here, and go to my GitLab. Let's put this on this monitor here. If you go to my GitLab page, gitlab.com/dwt1, and then go to my .files repo. And if you go into .exmonad and take a look at my exmonad.hs config, scroll all the way to the bottom. I think that's where I've put my main now. And in the main, you see xmproc0, xmproc1, xmproc2. They're just names I assigned. They don't mean anything. It's basically a xmobar process 0, 1, and 2. For monitors 0, 1, and 2, because I have 3 monitors. You see I have 3 different xmobars launching on each monitor. And I have 3 different configs for each xmobar, so you can have different widgets on each mobar. So those 3 lines, check those out. That's what you want. And then in the Exmonet, somewhere in here, you will see down here, PP output. That is the output to Xmobar. And you see I'm using xmproc0, xmproc1, and xmproc2, the 3 different Xmobars there. So check out my config, and you got it. So just copy what I'm doing. That's typically what I do. If I have trouble, you know, I just find somebody that's already worked it out and just copy what they're doing. All right. I kind of expected to have some Exmonet questions. I know a lot of you guys have been trying out Exmonet. I've been getting a lot of support kind of requests about Exmonet. And a lot of them I've just had to ignore because it's stuff, you guys are asking me about stuff that I don't use. I haven't checked out with Exmonet. I don't need particular functionality that you guys are asking about. So I would have to go read up on it and study it to give you the answer. And obviously, why would I do that when you could go do that? So I'm not gonna try. I'm gonna try not to RTFM anybody today. But, you know, some folks do need to RTFM just a little bit. All right. All right. Back to the chat. Let's see. Catch up on some of this. Yeah, Big Pod is in the chat. How you doing, Big Pod? Alexander, he says he's running Windows and Arch on 2 separate drives. That's the way to do it. If you're going to dual boot, use multiple drives and put, you know, Windows on a drive and put Linux on a drive. If you try to partition one drive, it causes problems. It's best to keep everything on its own drive, and dual booting typically works better when you do that. Let's see. Would you consider a video on Linux security topics? It's not one of those subjects that I study a lot as far as Linux security. I may do some videos on Linux security at some point, but probably not something that's ever going to be a main topic of the channel. It's not something that interests me that much. We're not going to be doing any penetration testing or anything like that. Yeah, do you recommend a separate home partition or not? I don't recommend a home partition. I don't care. Let me put it this way. If you're going to have a separate home partition, that's great. If you don't, that's fine too. The main thing is having good backups. Regardless, even if you do separate your home to its own partition, you still have to have proper backups. Don't think just by having a separate partition that when you reinstall, everything's going to be fine, because you always run the risk, especially if you're using commands like dd, of wiping out the wrong partition, right? So whether you separate the home partition or not, having backups is really the key. For me, I do keep certain directories on my system as their own partition. I have a massive music library, so I keep my music folder actually on a separate drive. It has its own drive, its own partition. But I could do that with my entire home directory, I guess. My video directory gets kind of large. That's typically where I put all my videos that I record, you know, all the content for the channel. So that particular directory gets very large, and it might be worth it for me to put all that on a separate drive, a separate partition. But again, you can't treat that as like that's a backup plan. And I think that's what some people assume it is. You still have to back up all your stuff at some point, somewhere else. All right. I know I've missed some of the chat here. I know we've got quite a few people now watching the stream. Some of you probably didn't get the notification, so I will try to keep up as best I can. Do you use IRC or Matrix? Yes. I have played around with Matrix a little bit. I did a video on Riot a month or two back. It's okay. I like IRC. I don't hang out on my IRC channels, so you can find a DistroTube channel over on the freenode network. So you can find hashtag DistroTube over on freenode. I'm almost never there. It's because when I'm in front of this computer, typically I'm trying to do work as far as content on the channel or researching things. And if I'm in a chat, people are going to be messaging me, and I just don't have time. I don't have time to be there, and I know that sounds bad. I know some of you guys want to chat with me, but if I'm chatting with you, then I'm not making content for the channel. So it's like, do you want me to be your chat buddy, or do you want videos? You kind of have to make a decision. So I've just distanced myself. I almost never launch IRC. I never chat on things like Discord. I don't even have a Telegram account. I know people have asked me about Telegram. I don't even want to be on those platforms. So just for sake of time. And it's like, outside of doing the videos, you know, if I'm not at this computer making content, I'm not sitting at this computer. You know, I'm doing live stuff. And yeah, I just can't be hanging out in a chat room. All right. Back to the chat. I know I missed some things. Hey, DT, what do you like more, Python or Haskell? Both great languages. What do I like more? You know, here lately, because I've been really spending a lot more time trying to learn a little Haskell, you know, because I've been tinkering with Haskell for, you know, 12 years or so. When I first installed Exmonet, you know, about 12 years ago, you know, I read Learn You a Haskell for Great Good. That's the official beginner's book for Haskell. And I read it way back then, and just to know enough so I could configure Exmonet. But it's not like I really sat down and wanted to really learn it. But now that I've read that book 3-4 times over the years, and I read it again here recently and made that video on getting started with Haskell for you guys wanting to learn Haskell, you know, starting from the very beginning. I do think Haskell is a fascinating programming language, but Python's great too. I'm not a Python master by any means. I'm not a Haskell master at all, but, you know, I can do simple scripting with both. Hey DT, I currently use i3 and know Haskell quite well. Should I switch to Exmonet? If you know Haskell, why not? I think you would find Exmonet is probably a better tiling window manager than i3. i3 for me seems like this discombobulated mess that's all kind of combined into a window manager, where Exmonet, I don't know, everything feels tightly integrated and just well done. The documentation is fantastic as far as the Haskell documentation. I don't know, I would give it a try if you already know Haskell, because that's really the thing that scares people, is the Haskell. If you already know Haskell, why not? There's no harm in installing it and giving it a try. Hey DT, any chance we can get a video of your GIMP graphics workflow you do for the channel? I've thought about that, and that's from Scott there. I've thought about that. Since I you know, use GIMP practically every day, right? We should do some more content on GIMP. Obviously, I'm not a professional like graphics designer or anything, but I do some okay stuff in GIMP. Yeah, so try to catch up on the chat. I know I missed a bunch of stuff here, guys. I do apologize. Why Arco Linux instead of Artix? That was from Felix, because I installed Arco. If I'd installed Artix, then I'd be running Artix. They're both Arch-based distros, right? So it's not like me installing Arco is a slight of all the other Arch-based distributions out there. It's just the one I installed. And typically when I install something, I don't wipe it out unless it's broken. So long as it works, I'm going to run it. Bogdan, thanks for the super chat there, buddy. He says, how did you drop the DWM in /opt? Saw it in one video. Did you modify the config.mk? How do you deal with updates? Rewrite the path every time? I'm assuming you're talking about the DWM package that I did in the AUR. That is part of the package build. If you read the package build in the AUR, it basically tells DWM, well, when it's building it, throw it in /opt. That's where everything goes. Now, how do you deal with updates? Well, when I update my DWM build, I need to go and update the AUR package build. So you guys that happen to be running that package get an update when you do a update with yay. It's actually not that complicated. I haven't actually updated my DWM in a while because I haven't been playing with DWM here lately in the last few weeks, so there's no updates to be had. If you installed it within the last month, for sure, it's the same version. Let's see. DT, hey, will you ever stop using Vim and start using the best text editor, Atom? That's from Penguin Revolution. I probably won't ever use Atom, but I haven't been using Vim that much here lately. I made a video about Cocoon about a month ago, and I used it for a couple of weeks, and I really liked it. It could be an alternative for you guys that like Vim, especially if you are all about the Unix philosophy, do one thing well. Take a look at Cocoon, but here lately, because I've been doing so much stuff with Exmonet and the Haskell programming language, I've been using Emacs every day here in the last 3 weeks or so. I've been back in Emacs just because Doom Emacs has all this built-in Haskell support in it, and it's fantastic. It really is. The right tool for the right job, and if you're going to be a Haskell developer, Emacs is kind of nice. It really is. Let's see. I'm going to have to skip ahead here, guys. Sorry, I can't keep up with all the chat. Yeah, AG, Atom is disgusting. Okay. Atom is, I don't know if it's disgusting. It's it's an Electron app. That's my only beef with it. Other than that, does it have the Vim bindings? If it supports Vim key bindings, then it's probably okay for me, like I could use it. If it didn't support Vim key bindings, then it would be tough. And then I really couldn't use it. Hey DT, you should make a video about KVM. I've been using it for a bit, and it's awesome. I did a video, not necessarily strictly about KVM. I did a video about Virt Manager, which uses KVM and QEMU. And Virt Manager, people have asked me about Virt Manager. Yeah, I've used Virt Manager on and off many times over the years. I typically keep going back to VirtualBox. And I don't know, VirtualBox just typically works. I've been sticking with Virt Manager here lately. All the distro previews or anything that you've seen on the channel in the last 3-4 months, all of them I think have been in Virt Manager. Except one. I had one that just would not work at all in Virt Manager. I had to do that one in VirtualBox. But it seems like most Linux devs these days, they make sure that their distro actually runs in VirtualBox. It seems like it almost, if it's going to work at all in a VM, it typically will work in VirtualBox, where sometimes in Virt Manager I've had things that just didn't boot up at all. But I've got both on the system, so if it doesn't work in one, I can always try the other. Yeah, DT, I had to troll you about the Atom editor. Yeah, it's all right. I don't mind a good trolling every now and then. And yes, Atom does support the Vim key bindings. That's good to know. DT, do you think the world is ending? Not that I know of. I don't have a TV though, so if something's going on, I wouldn't know about it. I haven't watched TV in years, and you guys know I don't hang out on social media, so I don't follow pop culture. I don't follow politics at all. I'm so disconnected from the political scene. I don't know anything about modern U.S. politics, so Somebody was asking me, DT, are you religious? You see the Buddha statue behind me? Let's not get into a religious discussion, but I respect many world religions and many religious gurus, historical. I have a lot of respect for Buddha, Jesus, many other religious figures, and I've studied a lot of the big world religions. You find a lot of commonalities between all of them, especially when you study the people behind it, the philosophers, the gurus, the people that, were out there really preaching what they were preaching. A lot of the messages are the same, and you start to make connections. Yeah, Darkwin says trolling is his job, right? Yeah. Yeah, I haven't caught up on some of my my YouTube videos. I haven't watched any YouTube videos in weeks now, so I need to check out Darkwin. He does some great troll videos. You guys aren't subscribed to Darkwin Tech, be sure to check him out. DT, what title barless browser were you using earlier? I tried QBrowser a few times and can't use it because most videos don't play, and the developer told me sucks to be me. So QBrowser, what you need to do is you need to configure it so when you open a YouTube link, a video link, it launches in MPV. It just launches that video in MPV. Don't try to watch it in the browser. So, and I know that's not a great solution, but QBrowser is not a perfect solution. I do have it on my system, and like you, I tried to use it for a little while. I haven't been using it much lately. Here lately, I've been using Firefox. So, and Brave. I still have Brave on the system. Brave, ever since I made that video on the Brave browser, Brave has been my browser on my phone. I, got rid of Chrome, or I guess you can't really get rid of Chrome on an Android device, but Brave has been my browser on my phone since then. And I use Brave a lot on my desktop, and I like it. It's fast for, speed and somewhat security because it blocks all the trackers and everything. Not a bad browser, although here recently in the news, they've been doing some shady things, the folks over at Brave. But really, I don't know, it's hard to beat Firefox. As far as, if you're looking for a free and open source browser, Firefox is kind of the standard right now. I keep looking for other things, but it's like I keep coming back to Firefox every time. But I've got a lot of browsers on the system. I do have QBrowser, Brave, Firefox. I think I still have the Min browser, although I haven't really played with it. I think I installed the Next browser. There were a couple of alternative browsers I installed, and just to briefly take a look at. But if I wasn't going to use Firefox, and I needed a traditional kind of browser, Brave would be my choice. Hey, DT, make a video on Lineage OS. It is OS to install on your phone. Yeah, but I'm not into mobile stuff, and I'm not going to play with my phone. It's a Galaxy 10. It's an expensive device, and quite frankly, it's just not something I'm into. If I had an extra phone to play around with that stuff, maybe, but I've never gotten into that stuff. I'm not about to wipe out my phone, my real phone. Hey, DT, feel free to review Temple OS at any point. I've talked about Temple OS a couple of times on the channel. As a matter of fact, I think I even took a look at it in a VM. I think I installed it in a VM. And it actually worked in a VM, which was kind of surprising. Hey, DT, did you see the guy from Mastodon Tech try to drag you on Mastodon for your latest GNOME video? No, I missed that. But I'm not sure what he's trying to drag me on. But people can comment and say what they want to say. Obviously, being somewhat public, I get hundreds, sometimes thousands of comments on videos. I can't respond to them all. I don't even try. So, hey, hi DT, are you using Inkscape? I've never gotten into Inkscape. No, I just do everything in GIMP. I should take a look at Inkscape and actually learn Inkscape because it's such a popular free and open source tool as well. Hi DT, can you make a tutorial introduction to the terminal? I think it will help a lot of people and do real well. Well, I've done so many videos about the terminal. I mean, how much more introductory kind of material do you need? Because I've done some pretty basic stuff on the terminal. Yeah, you don't have a second mobile device? Do you live under a rock? I guess so. I'm not that into phones, though. I actually wouldn't own a phone if I didn't have a job, right? A matter of fact, I've said this many times, I was a very late adopter to actually having a cell phone. I was just morally against the idea of having a phone on me all the time for years. It was probably, and some of you are going to think this is crazy because cell phones have been around, since the 1990s. I mean, people had cell phones. When I was in high school in the early 90s, I remember some people had phones even back then. I didn't personally own my own phone, my own cell phone, until 2012, 2013, when I had a job that I just had to be on call 24/7, and I had to have a phone on me all the time. So if I didn't have to have a phone, I wouldn't have one. So that's why I don't really know too much about phones and all these operating systems on the phones and things. It doesn't interest me. I don't actually do any work on my phone either. My phone is for making calls or sending a text message occasionally. I have computers, laptops and my desktop and everything for real work. I can pull up Pandora on my phone if I'm at the gym, listen to some music. So that's about it. That's the extent of my phone use. Penguin is asking, DT, what do you think about Linux Mint blocking the use of snaps on their distro? I was not that surprised about that decision. That seemed in line with kind of what their take on snaps has been from the beginning. I mean, they ripped out snapd and put in Flatpaks a while back, and I thought that was a bad move because so many people, when you Google any kind of tech support related to Linux, it's typically Ubuntu-centric support, forums and things like that. And a lot of it, if you're installing software, it's going to say sudo snap this and sudo snap that. And none of that's going to work in Linux Mint. And I think a lot of people, when they install Linux Mint, because it's Ubuntu-based, would assume, well, all this Ubuntu stuff's going to work in Mint. And it's not. And that hasn't been the case for a while. And I think by them actively trying to block snaps on the distro, that's just going a little further, but that's the direction they've been going in. I'm a little surprised so many people are upset about it now. You might have said something when they started this, a year or two ago. Hey DT, how do you make Windows spawn on a current workspace in Qtile? How do you make a Windows spawn on the current workspace in Qtile? Well, on any tiling window manager, if you launch something, it always spawns on your workspace, the one you're currently on. That's a strange question. Maybe you didn't word that right. Because any app you open is going to open on the workspace you're on, unless you set a rule for it not to. So if you've got something that's not opening on the workspace that currently has focus, you've set a rule, or if you stole somebody else's config, they had a rule for that particular program to open on some other workspace. I bet you've never tried Astra Linux. I've never even heard of Astra Linux. So yes, you are correct on that. Hey DT, just joined. Love your channel. Thank you, CL. Appreciate that, buddy. Hey DT, hope all is well. And that's from Josh at KeepItTechy. How you doing, Josh? For those of you not subscribed to KeepItTechy, check him out. He's got some great content. He's been doing some great videos here. Some of the recent ones I've checked out. I haven't checked out anything in the last couple of weeks though from him. I'm so backed up. I'm subscribed to about 150 people on YouTube, and I have not watched, I don't think, a single video from my subscriptions in 2 or 3 weeks. I'm just, you know, like I make so much Linux related content, I can't watch Linux related content. Like when I'm done, I put so many hours into this, and it's work, right? It's work. So then, okay, I've got some downtime. What do I want to do? If I'm going to watch something on YouTube, it's not going to be Linux or tech related at all. I'm going to watch something completely retarded, something way off the wall. It's not going to have anything to do with GNU/Linux. I'm going to watch cat videos or cooking videos or something fun. Why buy such an expensive phone if your needs are so minimal? You're right. I bought a very expensive phone, and I purposely bought that phone knowing it was so expensive. It's because I do have to have a phone and it needs to actually work. I have bought phones before that for whatever reason, they just die on me. Maybe you dropped them one too many times. And because I don't actually use my phone, I'm very easy on phones. But I have bought cheap brands of phones in the past. LG is one. Those phones, they just, you have them for a couple of months and you're not even using them in a hard way. You're not being rough with them. Sometimes they just break. They just quit working. Where I've owned 2 or 3 different Galaxies over the years now, and I've never had one break on me. And sometimes they last years. I'm talking about, typically your contract is what, 2 years? I had one last 4 or 5 years, before I got rid of it. They're expensive phones, but they're worth it. And they pay for themselves, really, because if you buy cheap phones, but those cheap phones, you're replacing them every 6 months to a year. You buy a good phone and it lasts you 3, 4, 5 years. It was smarter to buy the expensive phone. I will never go into a phone store and buy the cheapest thing. And I've done that in the past, but I'll never do it again. I've been burned too many times on that. Hey DT, could you please help us choose a new laptop for Linux, as the new AMD processors are killing it? How would they work with Linux? Any suggestions? Thanks in advance. As far as laptops, any laptop will work with Linux. As far as processors, any processor. I've never installed Linux on anything that had AMD or Intel processors and had an issue. So as far as brands of laptops that you can go and buy off the shelf at like a Best Buy, I do like the Lenovo's. ThinkPads are really nice. I also, if you're wanting something that's kind of cheap, and I've had good luck with them, Toshiba satellites are nice. If you're looking for something with Linux pre-installed, I've never bought anything from, System 76 or anything like that. Mainly just for me being cheap. Typically, I go buy something for $400 at Best Buy, and it's going to come pre-installed with Windows. I'm going to, throw Linux on it. So, if you wanted something really nice, yeah, you could take a look at the System 76 machines or the Dell machines. What is that? The XPS, the Dell, the one that's like $1,300, but it's got some pretty impressive specs. I'm gonna have to skip ahead in the chat here. Sorry, guys. Too much going on here. Derek, when using a window manager, what is the preferred way to temporarily mount and dismount other drives, partitions, like USB drives? So you're going to want to check out the Arch wiki on mounting and dismounting USB drives. Guess I could, you know what, you can Google it yourself, but the preferred method is using programs like udist2, and if you want a graphical way, udisky is one. If you do a search for Arch Linux mount USB, in Google, I'm sure you'll come up to that Arch wiki page, and it'll give you some programs that you can install. There's a few different things you can install to make that work for you. But that's the point of having a window manager is, when you install a desktop environment, typically they install all this extra stuff for you. With your window manager, you get to choose the programs that handle, mounting those devices. What is the difference between BSD and Linux? That's from Reese. Well, there's quite a bit, but as far as their origins, both of them, I guess, technically are Unix-like operating systems. Obviously, Linux is technically GNU/Linux because it uses so many of the GNU utilities, the GNU core utilities and the compiler and everything, where you don't have, all those GNU utils. In BSD, they have their own set of utils. Other than that, the licensing is very different. Linux, the kernel, is licensed under the GPL, the GNU public license. BSD is licensed, of course, under the BSD license. If you're not exactly sure the difference between those, BSD, that particular license is a very free license. So free that you could actually take BSD, close source it, make it proprietary, sell it. Well, you can't do that with Linux because the GPL prevents you from doing that. Even though it's a free license, it's not so free that it allows, something crazy like, hey, I'm going to take the Linux kernel, and then I'm going to close source it and try to sell it. You can't do that. The GPL means, hey, you found this way, this free piece of software, it has to remain free forever. You can't, if you redistribute this, it has to be redistributed the same way you found it. The BSD license doesn't have such restrictions. As far as the operating system, like if you were going to use it as a desktop operating system, the difference is Linux works and BSD is not going to be a great desktop experience for you. On the servers, yeah, either one. Yeah, GNU literally stands for GNU's not Unix. That's correct. That's Master Billy there, yeah. Yeah, so BSD, I guess, has more of a direct link to the Unix operating system, where GNU/Linux, technically, even though when Richard Stallman created GNU and he created the acronym GNU's not Unix is what it stands for, he was saying that tongue-in-cheek because it's very much Unix, but there's legal reasons it can't be Unix. So GNU's not Unix. Putting that out there just in case anybody wants to sue or have any kind of legal issues, because somebody actually owns the trademark to Unix, or at least did, when he created that. You couldn't call a non-Unix operating system Unix. Make a review on OpenBSD would be a cool video. Yeah, but I would have to, I could install OpenBSD, I guess, in a VM and take a look at it. I couldn't install OpenBSD on physical hardware and make a cool video on it because none of this is going to work. That's not what OpenBSD is about. You got to think about what some of these operating systems you guys are asking me to try out. Some of these operating systems are not suited for desktop use, especially desktop use like I'm doing. I have all this audio equipment, microphones and cameras. I got to use things like OBS and, OpenBSD. That's not remotely an option. Not like I can just wipe out Arco Linux here on my main production machine, install OpenBSD, and tomorrow be doing all of this again. That can't happen. I wish it could, but that's not what OpenBSD is about. Hey DT, where is your accent from? Earth. I am in Louisiana. What's the status of the herd kernel? They're still working on it. Matter of fact, I know you could install Debian with the herd kernel at one time. I don't know if you still can. I think you can check out Arch with the herd kernel. Didn't Arch have the option to, you could use the Linux kernel, the herd kernel, or the BSD kernel? I don't know. There were a couple of distros out there that you could play with herd if you wanted to. But again, why would you? Because it's not going to be anywhere near what the Linux kernel is. I mean, the BSD kernel compared to the Linux kernel is light years behind. And then herd. So, but if you just want to play with it, yeah, go check it out. Yeah, the Linux kernel is monolithic. By definition, it is bloated. I've made that statement before too, that the people that complain about systemd being bloated, right? But nobody ever complains about the Linux kernel, how bloated it is. Yeah, good point. ADT, which router are you using for your network? I migrated from pfSense in KVM to a Debian server with NF tables running in LXC. I have a couple of subnets in my network. I'm not doing anything fancy with my router as far as if you're actually talking hardware. It's some brand of Linksys. It's nothing special. Matter of fact, now that you've mentioned that, Grayson, I actually, about a week ago, I was thinking about buying a new router. I don't know what brand, but I want to make a substantial upgrade in the router department. If you guys have any suggestions, something for a nice home router, needs to have at least 4 ports because I've got all the rooms in the house wired, for Ethernet, and 4 rooms. But that should be standard for any router these days, I would hope. Let's see. Running Linux on Windows is a bad idea because if Windows crashes, slows the PC, it will take Linux down. Well, running Linux on Windows, are we talking VMs? Or are we talking what, the Windows subsystem for Linux? Obviously, anytime you're running another operating system within an operating system, if the host operating system goes down, yeah, you're going to lose the VMs. But if you want to run either Linux or Windows in a VM, I would always suggest use Linux on a host machine, run Windows in a VM, because that would be the safer way of doing things. If you were worried about privacy and security and all the nasty things that Windows may be doing to you, run Linux on your main machine. Install Windows in a VM. Don't run Windows on your main machine and then install Linux in the VM. That's not the way I would go. You guys had some questions and I lost them. The chat jumped ahead. Have you tried the Acme text editor from Plan 9? I have not. DT, from all the distros you tested, what do you recommend for a potato laptop? So if you got something really bad, and the laptops I have behind me, these test laptops, they're not powerful machines. But if you're looking for something that just works, regardless, you want something stable, Antix. Antix, I believe, still has 32-bit ISOs. So that's a good way to go. And because it's based on Debian, you're going to get all the software and everything you need. So if you got something really ancient, try Antix first, because it's still a pretty good experience. If for some reason Antix doesn't work, then you got to get into things like Puppy or Tiny Core, stuff like that. And those are less than ideal daily desktop operating systems, where Antics is pretty good. I like Antics. What's your favorite video game? I'm not really a gamer, so I couldn't even answer that question because I've played so few games. So I don't have enough of a perspective of gaming to really answer that. Here lately, I've been playing Xonotic occasionally on live streams. I like Zero AD, the free and open source real-time strategy game. Fantastic. Battle for West North, if you want turn-based strategy gaming. That's a really nice free and open source game, too. Might play some West North this evening, actually, now that I mention it. I haven't played that one in a while. Fun game. Derek, do you season your meat with Old Bay? Old Bay seasoning? No. No. Not something I use that often, Old Bay. Prefer Tony Chachere's. If you're just looking for a good, seasoning salt. Tony Chachere's Cajun seasoning. You should be able to find that pretty much anywhere. It's pretty common. It's in a green bottle. Yeah, the Nighthawk is Big Pot. I've had other people recommend me the Nighthawk. Yeah, but you could use a switch for multiple ports anyway. Okay. Yeah, I've heard good things about the Nighthawk. I do know it's expensive, though. I was checking some of the prices on Amazon. Not a cheap router there. What is RTFM'd? RTFM is go read the fantastic manual. Do you listen to Tool? I don't know anything about Tool. Sorry, guy. What's your favorite TV series? So I mentioned I don't own a TV. I haven't watched TV in years. Don't know anything about TV. What's going on TV? But having watched TV in way back, and of course I do have a Netflix account, so occasionally I will catch up on new TV series, but on Netflix. Breaking Bad was probably my favorite TV series of all time. Just a fantastic show. I love Breaking Bad. All right. I skipped ahead here. Hey DT, make a review on Qubes OS. The problem with Qubes OS is it won't run in a VM, so I would have to install it on physical hardware. And then I would have to, use basically two machines because I'd have to have a machine to stream what I was doing on the other machine. Qubes OS would be a challenge for me to make a video on, unfortunately. Tool is awesome. I might have to check out Tool if you recommend it. Yeah, Darkwing. Yeah, RTFM. Yeah, it's language DT won't use on his channel, but I use it on mine. Yeah. If you want to know what the F stands for, go check out Darkwing. Any video, you'll figure out what the F stands for really quick. Yeah, Shane says he's watching Breaking Bad. It's awesome. It's the best show ever. If you had to choose, what's your favorite piece of open source software of all time? Besides Linux? Let's throw out Linux because obviously that's an easy one. You know what? I really like GIMP. I've been a GIMP user for a long time, and I know some people, well, it's not Photoshop, but you know what? GIMP is really good for what it is. I think not enough people recognize GIMP as just really a shining example of what free and open source software can be. LibreOffice would also be another good choice in that aspect. Hey, I'm wondering if you can enable slow mode in chat. I'm not exactly sure how to do that. I don't do these live streams that often. I'm not sure what slow mode is or how I would go about enabling it. Let's see, if I go into the stream settings. I don't know. I'd have to research that topic a little bit, so I'm not sure on that. Maybe some of the other guys that do more live streams can tell me where to find that at. Yeah, GIMP uses GTK, powered by GNOME. Well, actually, GIMP invented GTK. The GTK, you know, that particular toolkit, guess what the G originally stood for? GIMP. A little bit of trivia. That's right. The GNOME project didn't invent GTK. GIMP did. Yeah, could you make a video where you explore Morpheus Linux, the Suckless project? Morpheus Linux, the Suckless project. Okay, so Suckless has its own Linux distribution. If they do, has it been updated in recent years? Because that's the problem with something really obscure, like this Morpheus Linux you're talking about. I've never heard of it. I would be surprised if it's something that like I install and it's like ancient, you know. Maybe the repos are dead or you can't get anything installed on it. That's my only problem with stuff like that. I might take a look at it though. But if it was a real suckless distro or suckless operating system that people used, I probably would have heard of it before you just mentioned it. So that kind of scares me that I'm just now hearing about it. So. Derek, what is your note-taking app? Okay. I mentioned on the channel many times, I'm not a note taker, so I don't use note-taking apps. I mean, sometimes I play around with them on the channel to show you guys, because I know a lot of you guys are into this productivity kind of stuff, and if I was somebody that used note-taking, I really liked Joplin. I did a video on Joplin. Joplin's great. If you're a big-time Vim user, you do everything in Vim, check out the Vim Wiki. I really like the Vim Wiki. And if you're an Emacs user, just quit looking. You don't need to find a note-taking app if you're an Emacs user. You already have org mode installed. It's there. Org mode for everything. ADT, could you possibly make a video on creating custom layouts for i3? I haven't done anything in i3 in forever. But that's not a bad idea. It would be interesting to go back to i3 and check it out. It's not my favorite window manager, but, you know, it's something different. I do like, you know, switching things up every now and then, so that's a possibility there, Donnie. We might do some i3 stuff. DT, I was monitoring my Wi-Fi network and noticed there were small data transfers trickling without any network activity. Is this to be expected, like a protocol handshake? Not sure on that. Not sure on that. Might want to investigate that a little further. So I knew somebody, thank you, Joe Panico, is going to tell me how to enable slow mode. I knew somebody would answer the call. How do I disable slow mode or enable slow mode? And this is not going to be great live stream material here, me reading about slow mode. Let's see. I don't know. I don't have time to read all this. I was hoping somebody just tell me where, if it was like a button somewhere. Yeah, we'll just have to scrap the slow mode idea. Maybe the next time I stream, I'll actually do some research on how to use YouTube and, you know, this YouTube studio thing. Let's see. Hey, Spectre WM, the NEM window manager. I'm not sure what that. Not sure what you were asking there, Steam. Is Spectre WM the NEM window manager? I'm assuming you mistyped something there. Spectre WM's great, though. DT, when will you take a deep dive into LXD? Okay, so we're getting into containers. I don't know. I don't know if I'll do something on the channel using LXD and LXC. Maybe we'll get into doing some stuff with Docker at some point. Maybe. I don't know. It's not something I've played around with much. DT, can you do another video on the fish shell and set up the config files? Setting up the config files, there's not much to it. I mean, it's like setting up your bash RC or your ZSH RC. You know, throw some aliases in there. I'm not sure what you would want there, Charles. I mean, at that point, I have actually thought about doing something like that with my bash RC. Since so many people obviously have bash on their systems anyway, even if you're not using it, you probably have bash on the system. I've thought about just going line by line, you know, everything through the bash RC and what it does, you know, as far as settings and aliases and things like that. I don't know if that would make great content, though. But, you know, sometimes I do these, especially for educational reasons. I put out these videos sometimes that I know not that many people are going to watch, but I think it's an important content to have out there. Just, I know people are going to have this problem and need an answer to it. So, let's see. I'm going to skip ahead here in the chat, because we don't have slow mode enabled. DT, have you thought about making a public email address for your channel to contact you? I am about as public as you can get. So you can find me over on Mastodon. So give me a... You can find DistroTube over at mastodon.technology. Join Mastodon, and you can find me there, and you can message me and do whatever you want. If you go to distrotube.com, I even have a forum on my website. You can join that and message me there. If you are on GitLab, obviously you have my GitLab. Obviously, if you open an issue or something on one of my GitLab repositories, it should have something to do with these particular repositories I have. You know, it should be more of a support request kind of thing. Rather than just, hey, DT, what's up? But if you want to message me on Mastodon, that's fine. Reddit, I have a subreddit, the DistroTube subreddit. I don't put out a public email, you know, that often. I sometimes throw my email out there. Everybody knows that they could email me at derek@distrotube.com. I don't put it out there because, you know, I'm going to get hundreds of emails. I'm not going to read them all. So, especially if it's a novel. I don't have that kind of time. Again, it's kind of the getting back to why I don't hang out in like IRC chat and Discord and Telegram and things like that. If I did, I'd never get anything done. So yeah, go to the gear icon, live chat, and enable slow mode. Ah, finally somebody told me exactly what I needed. I'm gonna go to the gear icon, and I'm getting a little circle thingy. Live chat. Enable slow mode. Let's save that. All right. Slow mode is on. Now we know. All right, appreciate that. All right, can you make a video on all types of SSH tunneling? Possibly. I haven't done anything with SSH in a while. I do like SSH. Maybe. I don't know. I got so many things in the to-do list. You know, I've got a million things that I've jotted down as far as possible video topics to do at some point. What is the difference between DWM, Qtile, Spectre, WM once they are fully configured? By the way, I have one monitor. Very good that you answered the monitor question, because if you have multi-monitors, there's much more of a difference. If you only have one monitor, then there's not as much of a difference. But the difference between DWM, Qtile, and Spectre WM is Spectre WM is very easy to configure because it has a config file that's in a very easy syntax, new user friendly syntax. It's not, you know, computer code. Qtile a little more difficult, but Qtile is still pretty easy to get into, but it's completely written and configured in Python. The config file for Qtile is a Python script. If you know a little Python, you're good. If you don't, it may be a little challenging, but not too difficult. I bet you could figure it out. DWM is a bit challenging. There's no documentation. Everything's written in C. The config file is C. And you have to patch DWM for it to be usable. You have to patch it a lot, actually, for DWM to be usable. So, if you're new to tiling window managers, I would not start with DWM. I would just avoid that for a little while. Starting with something like Qtile would be a better place to start. Or Awesome. It's a good one to start with. Or i3. And once you get to know one or two of those, then maybe branch out something a little more difficult like DWM. All right, let's see. The timeout is too long. Set it to like 10 seconds. Oh my goodness. First you guys want me to enable slow mode. Now it's too long. Well, 10 seconds. That's it. We're not playing with slow mode anymore. You're just going to have to deal with it at this point. All right. ET, have you tried the Dvorak keyboard layout? No, I haven't. I have no plans to check it out, though. At least not at this point. I'm pretty good with just a standard QWERTY layout. On my ErgoDoc's easy. So, but is it already But it is already configured, and I do C in Python. So what is the difference after the configuring? Well, after the configuring, what's the difference depends on you. So these tiling window managers, what's the difference after you configure them? Well, that depends on how you configure them. I hope that makes sense. Basically, you write your own window manager is what you're doing, whether it be in C and with DWM and Python and Qtile and Haskell and Exmonet. But, you know, what I do in Qtile would not be what you do in Qtile, probably. In essence, though, you can make pretty much every tiling window manager basically do the same things. Because they're all configurable, they're all customizable. Because they're all customizable, you can make them all do the same thing. And what do you think about the legacy cruft in the Linux kernel? I don't have any thoughts about that, other than I know there's a lot of old code there, but they have been actively trying to remove some of that stuff. I know recently we finally got some of the floppy drive support removed. How many people use floppies anyway? So at some point you got to let some of that ancient technology just fall by the wayside. Yeah, why do you choose Arco instead of plain Arch? I installed Arco. I'm not even sure what the point of that question is. And I don't know why people ask me that question. It's like, what does it matter? And if I'd installed Arch, would you be asking me, why did you install Arch instead of Arco? Because I installed Arch. I mean, what's... am I going to find something special in one that's not in the other? Having used both, I can tell you, no. I'm not going to find any difference. So, what is your preferred caffeinated drink? Coffee. Black. Yeah, your configuration should depend on your workflow. Yep. And that's one of the reasons why people that ask me about grabbing other people's configs, including my own, and I put my configs on GitLab for you guys to examine and take a look at, so you guys can hopefully basically treat it as documentation. But you don't want to just take my config for whatever window manager, and I have a million of them on my GitLab, and think it's going to work for you. No, that's the way I configured it to work the way I want to work. For you, though, you basically want to write your own config. At some point, you want to kind of start from scratch and start from the ground up. This is how many workspaces I want, you know, with my monitors set up, and here's what I want them named, and here's the layouts I like to work in. You know, for me personally, you know, on my tiling window managers, I like to have a master and stack layout. That's the main layout I'm always in, unless I'm only using one program full screen, like a full screen web browser. And then I need a monocle layout. Other than that, having a floating layout is nice, but even if I didn't have a floating layout, I can always force a window to float if I need to. So really, give me 3 layouts and I'm good. But in my configs, typically I put like 8, 10, 12 different layouts in Qtile and Exmonet and Awesome. Not because I use all those layouts, I just want to have them in my configs so you guys can check them out. So pick the ones you like to use, get rid of the rest. Do we know anything new from ProctorU since the video you did on it? Other than it's still just crazy, evil software? No, I mean, I'm not sure what we would expect to hear about ProctorU other than what it is. As far as them, would they respond to my video? I doubt it. I doubt they care, you know, what some small YouTuber says about their product. And I'm not the only one that has complained. Some people have complained in very public ways, people much bigger than me, like mainstream news outlets, have talked a lot about ProctorU and how it's not good for our students. I'm sure they've heard a lot of these complaints, but they're probably too busy making a lot of money right now, especially because of the pandemic. I'm sure they're making a lot more money with ProctorU. So, DT, what is your opinion on Libre SSL? No opinion. Isn't that the one that was wasn't that created by the OpenBSD guys? I'm sure it's fantastic though. Just not something I've done any kind of research on or looked into at all. So, Derek, how do you set up a proper auto start in DWM? I'm getting a lot of tiling window manager questions today. I guess we could look at some configs. You know what? I'm not actually going to bring up any configs in Vim or Emacs or anything. Let's go to the browser, because I'm going to show you guys what you need to do. Let me zoom in here. Go to Derek's GitLab page. It's in the show description. Go to my .files. In my .files, I have a folder called .dwm in my home directory. That is where I put my autostart.sh for DWM. And that's it. I launch PyCom, the compositor, Nitrogen sets my wallpaper, and DWM blocks is the widgets in the panel in DWM. And then if you want my DWM blocks, that folder is also in my home folder. It's just called DWM blocks. There's the source code for that. If you want these individual widgets in DWM blocks, go into .local/bin, and these 6 shell scripts that I wrote are what actually launches in my DWM blocks. Make sure that if you put these in .local/bin, that you put .local/bin as part of your path. It needs to be exported as part of your path in your bash RC. Otherwise, these are actually not going to launch. So be sure to do that. I hope all that made sense. If it didn't, maybe rewatch this portion of the video later. So Yeah, DT used some sensible patches. Yeah, my DWM is patched a lot. I think I patched it, I don't know, with 7 or 8 different things. And matter of fact, if I go back to my GitLab, let's get out of the .files repository and go to DWM-DistroTube, this particular repository. That's the source code for my DWM-DistroTube package in the AUR. But you don't have to be on Arch to install this. You can just grab it and do a sudo make install and you're good. But I think I did I not put the patches? I thought I had added all the patches that I use somewhere in the make or in the README. Yeah, I did alpha for transparency, so you can have transparent windows, transparent panel. Attach aside so the new client appears in the stack rather than as the master. I like when I open things in a master and stack layout that the new windows appear as part of the stack and they don't take the place of the master. I did cycle layouts because by default, DWM does not allow you to cycle through different layouts. That's crazy, right? Why would a window manager not have that built in? It doesn't, though. You have to patch it. I patched it to have a grid layout, just in case people needed it. Restart SIG, that allows DWM to be restarted with a key binding, rather than having to log out and log back in to restart DWM. That's crazy, right? Rotate the stack, that allows you to move windows through the stack. So if you have, a million things open, so here in Exmonet, so if I want to move a window through the stack, you can do that. Well, by default in DWM, as crazy as it sounds, you can't do that. And you guys didn't see that, but so imagine I open 4 windows here and I want this window to be moved through the stack. I can put it anywhere I want. DWM doesn't allow that. By default, you have to patch it, and you patch it with the rotate stack patch. Status padding adds padding in the status bar. That's your DWM blocks and all. If you want it to be configurable where you can specify exactly what kind of padding you want around the workspace numbers and things, you need that. Useless gaps adds gaps between your windows. That's all the patching I did on my build of DWM. If you're on Arch and you're not already using DWM, because it'll overwrite your config, you can yay -S DWM-DistroTube-git, and it will install it for you. If you're not on Arch, just go to my DWM-DistroTube repository and do a git clone. Then once you git clone it, cd into that directory, do a sudo make install, boom, you're done. All right. Yeah, you are a good teacher. Thank you, DT. All right, appreciate you. Yeah, I've done plenty of teaching in the past, so something I enjoy. Something I'm good at. Good at explaining things in a slow kind of way where people kind of get it. You don't want to rush through things, especially if can be a complicated subject matter. DT, have you used Wine to run Windows programs on Linux? I have used Wine in the past. Years ago, I haven't used it in a long time, though. But, that was mainly a stopgap early in my Linux journey where I thought I needed these Windows programs I was used to. But it's been so long now since I've used Windows. There's no Windows programs I need because I don't even know what runs on Windows anymore. It's been so long since I've used Windows. So I've just accepted the fact I run Linux. I run Linux software. So I don't care what people on Windows happen to be running. Windows is dead to me. Any software that doesn't run on Linux might as well be dead to me either. I don't need to know about it. But I know when you first switch to Linux, you're used to those programs that you've always used for years on Windows. So you're trying to find ways to run those programs. But at some point, you have to recognize the fact you're running a different operating system. You probably just need to find the Linux alternatives. DT, have you thought about maintaining your patched binaries as a package build at the AUR. You're talking about the little scripts for the DWM blocks. I have not actually thought about that. That's not a bad idea, though. Because I have gotten people have a lot of problems when they try to install my DWM blocks, because then they haven't figured out they need to go grab those binaries from .local/bin. And then even if they figure that out, a lot of people don't put it in their path. So those binaries don't actually execute. Because if you don't put .local/bin in your path, then technically what you would have to do is go back into the blocks.h file, the header file, and actually put the full path for each of those. So you would have to actually specify /home/user/.local/bin name of script, which nobody wants to do. Just make sure you export .local/bin in your bash RC or whatever, and you're good. DT, what's your beef with Linux Mint? Never had any beef with Linux Mint. I'm not sure what you're talking about there. I don't think I've ever had a negative thing to say about Linux Mint. All right. DWM is bloat. Use SOWM. I don't know SOWM. I'm not sure about that one. I may have to check that one out. I'm assuming it's a tiling manager, but maybe it's a floating one. I don't know. Might check it out, though. Hey, DT, I'm using Exmonet thanks to you, and I love it. Very cool. Yeah, a lot more people are trying out Exmonet these days, and most of you seem happy with it, which I kind of thought many of you would. Definitely a fantastic window manager. It does have a learning curve, pretty steep learning curve, but you know, with all the videos I've put out on it, I'm hoping that kind of eased some of the growing pains. Think about when I first switched to Linux back in like 2008, 2009. Within a few months of using Linux, I started window manager hopping, OpenBox, and then probably within a year of switching to Linux, I was in Exmonet. I installed Exmonet and started using it. And back then, you didn't have YouTube. You didn't have YouTube Linux content. You didn't have this massive collection of configs on GitHub and GitLab. I mean, GitHub existed back then, but it's not like you didn't have the resources you had today. And my config file, you know, all this knowledge I have about Exmonet was acquired over many, many, many years. And most of it was trial and error. You know, I had to figure some of this stuff out. Had to go actually read the official documentation. Now, the great thing, especially with video content like YouTube, is, you know, especially if you're one of these visual learners, it makes some of this so much easier than what it was back then. Hey, DT, what are your thoughts on Hackintosh? I see absolutely no point in Hackintosh. If you want to use Mac OS, you should probably just buy a Mac. Really? I mean, that's what I think on that. As far as a Linux user, why in the hell would I install the Mac OS or Hackintosh? I have absolutely no reason to do so. Yeah, so it is floating, but very lightweight. So SOWM is a floating window manager. Okay. Well, I still may take a look at it, though. There's some floating window managers I really like. You guys know I love OpenBox. Like JWM, you know, the one that's used in Puppy. It's really nice. Fluxbox, you know, it's good too. Have you tried the KDE Plasma Desktop? That's from Any Creature? Yes, I have. All right. Hey DT, please make another video on BSPWM. It's still installed. I just never log into it, or I haven't in a while. I think I logged into BSPWM briefly about 2 or 3 weeks ago, just to make sure it was still working. Make sure you know, it's still there. I opened a few windows and everything. You know, like once a month, I'll log into i3 and BSPWM. You know, the things that I don't use that often. You know, I'm always in Exmonet, Qtile, Awesome. Like I use those on kind of a regular basis. I'm in those a lot. But I don't log into i3 or BSPWM that often. DT, how to improve the font quality in Linux? People say that the font rendering in Linux is bad. I haven't noticed that. Not lately. When I first switched to Linux, it was noticeable on certain distributions. Back when I first switched to desktop Linux, Ubuntu had really good font rendering compared to a lot of the competing distros at the time. Like when you compared font rendering in Ubuntu and font rendering in mainline Debian, for example, years ago, it was a night and day difference. Like Ubuntu was so much better as far as the fonts and everything. Now, though, because I do distro hop and I check things out in VMs and on my test equipment, on my laptops, I'm always installing new stuff. I installed 2 or 3 new distros in the last week on these laptops, not for content on the channel, just for me playing around with. And I never go, oh man, the fonts in this distro look bad. It seems like that's less of a problem these days, but I don't know. You guys may have a different take on that. Yeah, Roger says, greetings from Uruguay. Are you planning to start programming? I saw your Haskell vids, and I think that's a good progression. Well, I mean, I play around with programming, have for since I was a kid. So, do I plan on being a professional programmer as far as like a career? Doubtful, right? But yeah, I like tinkering around with programming. Hey DT, what are your general thoughts on FreeBSD? I haven't used FreeBSD enough to really give you any real thoughts on it, although I'm sure it's a fine operating system. Certainly, it's probably a great server operating system. I don't know FreeBSD on the desktop. I've never tried to live in FreeBSD as a desktop user. I probably wouldn't try it, to be honest, because of what I do as far as this kind of content that I make. FreeBSD is probably more suited for attempting that, though, than something like NetBSD or OpenBSD. People ask me about those, and I already know those would never work. Have you seen the the Chris Titus Tech new video, Winbuntu? I have not. I haven't seen. I mentioned this early in the stream, you guys that are just getting here. I haven't seen anybody's content in the last 3 weeks, maybe the last month. I haven't watched any Linux content on YouTube. I just haven't had the time, and quite frankly, I just don't. Like I spend so much time in Linux making my own content, I can't go watch other videos about this stuff. It's not interesting at all to me. What do you think about non-rolling release distros? I find they're actually pretty buggy and stuff. Never gets updated for like a year. Well, non-rolling release distros are great. It's like the right tool for the right job. If I'm running a server, then obviously I want something that's not a rolling release distro. I'm not installing Arch on a server. I'm not going to do it. Right? It's, for me, it's Debian stable, Ubuntu LTS server, or CentOS. It's the only thing I'm going to run on a server. So, as far as they're buggy, well, they shouldn't be buggy. Stuff never gets updated. Well, if stuff is never updated, then it shouldn't break. So I'm not sure where if you install something and it works and it never sees an update, then how does it break? Unless you're breaking it. So it's something you're doing. It's not the distro's fault. Yeah, I just installed Arch following your guide. Much easier than I thought. Well, I appreciate that, Brian. I'm happy you got Arch installed following my guide, because so many people are having trouble with that guide. I made that video, almost a year ago now, that Arch installation video. And after I posted that video, like 3 weeks later, the Arch guys changed the install process. So it's slightly different than what it is on that video. But it's different enough that people that are following it word for word, line by line, everything I did in that video, are struggling because now you have to install the Linux kernel. I didn't have to install the Linux kernel. It was already part of the base install when I made the video. Now you actually have to do a pacman-S Linux and install the Linux kernel. I used nano in that video because nano was already on the system. It was part of the base package. Now nano's not there. So pacman-S nano if you want to use nano. Pacman-S vim if you want to use vim. Otherwise, you're going to have to use VI. Good luck with that. I'm a vim user and I hate using VI, right? Says Nigel, he says, hey DT, I'm using Manjaro, but there's some hate lately because holding back packages would break stuff from the AUR. What are your thoughts about this? Well, because Manjaro does hold their packages back a couple of weeks, it possibly could break some things in the AUR because those AUR packages are going to have dependencies that are in the regular repository. But if you're holding back packages, maybe what it's expecting to find there hasn't made it there yet. So yeah, you do run the risk of some things in the AUR being broken because of the updates. Now, of course, you just wait a couple of more weeks and it'll work. So it's not like it's permanently broken. It's just broken very temporarily there. So, and it's not like it breaks everything in the AUR. It's just every now and then you'll run into that issue. So, but there's no way around that. Well, there is a way around that. What you would do is you change the repos in Manjaro. You basically go to the unstable branch in Manjaro, which is actually just the mainline Arch cadence. So you're no longer holding packages back. As soon as it's available in Arch, it's available in your version of Manjaro. Let's see, DT, do you prefer the LTS kernel? I don't use the LTS kernel on my systems because of this channel. I like, having the new kernel that's out every time, just in case, something breaks, I want to know about it. If I didn't do the YouTube channel, yeah, I would see no reason to ever use anything other than the LTS kernel. Why do you need the new kernel that comes out every week? You don't need it. Unless you have brand new hardware that just came out and you absolutely need a feature in that kernel. But most of us are not going to fall into that category. Most of us would be just fine running the LTS kernel. So. IDT, what do you think for this? Why you should migrate everything from Linux to BSD? I have no thoughts on that. I don't know why you would migrate. I'm a desktop user, so on servers, I don't know. So I'm not a sysadmin. But on the desktop, obviously, you're not migrating from Linux to BSD on the desktop. So unless you have very limited requirements on what you're doing on that particular desktop. Yeah, how often does Arch/Arch break on your system? Never. I've been running Arco for a little over a year now on this machine. Since I bought this machine, I bought it. I had an Arco ISO on a USB stick already, so I installed Arco on it. It's worked since then. Before that, my previous machine, I installed Manjaro on that and used Manjaro for, well, at least a year until I bought the new machine. Manjaro never broke. Installed mainline Arch on my previous machine as well. Ran it. It didn't break. I've had several Arch-based distros on my testing laptops. Never had an update or anything break those either. So, but I'm not saying there's not the occasional little hiccup or paper cut. I do remember they did a update of Python one time that broke all your Python apps. But it wasn't like you had to reinstall or anything. You just needed to reinstall all your Python apps, especially the ones that were installed through the AUR. You just needed to reinstall them. But I've never, had an Arch install where one day the machine just didn't boot up, you know, after an update or something. I've never had that happen. I've had that happen on other distributions, other rolling release distributions. I've had some Gentoo installations that quit working on me after an update. Debian Unstable, although I haven't done Debian Unstable in a long time. Years ago, though, I had some bad luck running Debian Unstable. Arch, though, Arch seems pretty stable for the most part. Yeah, do you use Timeshift? I don't. Yeah, I don't do snapshots. I've never gotten into it. I just, all the data that I need backed up, I back up to an external SSD drive. But I don't bother doing snapshots of my machine. I guess I could. I do have some extra drive space. I actually have extra drives in this machine that I could just dedicate to taking snapshots. But as long as I've got my documents, you know, the files that matter, the data that matters to me backed up, then I'm good. ET, your views on Intel Management Engine? I don't know. You've asked it several times. I didn't answer you because I have no thoughts on it. They're disabling it in Pop! OS? Okay. I don't know. Try Black Arch. Now that is the pen testing distro. Isn't that what Black Arch is? It's a Arch-based pen testing distro, kind of like Kali or Parrot. I guess I could try it. I'm not a pen tester though. The problem is it's going to have, you know, hundreds of these programs on it that I don't know anything about. I couldn't tell you guys anything about. All I could do is boot into it and say, here's this distro. Can't show you anything. That's the problem with doing a video about those kinds of distros though. I'm not the right person to do a video on something like that. So, DT, is Emacs worth getting into? Absolutely. Emacs is fantastic. I would ask this question: have you used Vim? If you already know Vim and you kind of, you know, gotten into how extensible text editors work, where you basically have to config your text editor, you have to basically write your own text editor, then Emacs is kind of the next step in that. If you need to take that next step. Not everybody needs to. I would say if you're a professional programmer, professional developer, you make a living writing code, then something like Emacs makes a lot more sense, because learning eLisp may be a little easier for you, and then writing your own config for Emacs, basically writing your own custom distribution of Emacs, because that's what you do. You basically, Emacs allows you to write your own version of Emacs. You know, you create your text editor. That's not something most people need to do, but I think people that, again, if your profession is programming, that might be something you want to investigate. If you just occasionally open up config files and scripts, you know, in the terminal like I do, I don't necessarily have to use Emacs. Vim is just fine for that. Probably better suited for that. Again, the right tool for the right job. You have to figure out, is it right for you? There's no one size fits all in anything. There's no, this distribution is the best, this window manager is the best, this text editor is the best. You know, you kind of have to find out what works for you. All right, guys. I'm just going to go a couple of more minutes here. Anybody else got anything they want to get it in the next couple of minutes, because I will be killing the stream probably in about 5 minutes. All right. Hi DT, watched your Gentoo installation, liked it very much. Installed Gentoo in a VirtualBox. What do you think about Gentoo on the desktop? I consider it now, but I'm not sure. Gentoo would probably be just fine on the desktop. It's a Linux distribution. The only thing with Gentoo is everything is built from source. So installing software takes longer. Updating the system takes longer. Do you need that? Not everybody needs that, because the whole point of building everything from source is you set all these use flags. Everything gets compiled with your particular use flags that you set, to keep down the bloat. Very, very few desktop Linux users care about that stuff. If you happen to care about that stuff, Gentoo is a great distribution. If you don't care about that stuff at all, then why spend so much time building all these packages from source and, just the headaches and everything involved with it? Yeah, DT, do you still use VIFM? I do. Have it on my system right now. And he's talking about the file manager VIFM. This is VIFM here. Pretty cool little file manager. Terminal-based file manager, and I have it set up. Obviously, you guys have already seen some of the image previews and some of the other directories I was in. That's my wallpapers directory. But the image previews are handled by a Python library called Uberzug. I did a video on VIFM and Uberzug, nearly 2 years ago, probably. DT, did you get a little rain last week? If you're talking about from the tropical storm, yeah. Wasn't too bad, though. Weather wasn't bad at all. I needed the rain. The yard needed it. So I was actually happy we got some rain. But it was actually pretty weak. I actually, because where I live, it's kind of prone to flooding. When you get a good rain, it wasn't anywhere near enough rain to have to worry about flooding. It was just a good storm. All right. VIFM is bloat. Well, I mean, everything is bloat for file management, unless you just want to use the command line. That's typically what I do. I actually don't open up VIFM very often, because I just, CD around and MV and CP and RM and everything in the terminal, right? You can do all your file management at the command line. Most of the time, there's no reason to need a file manager open. Typically, I'll only open like VIFM or something if I visually need to see me, like if I create a file and I need to see it appear, or delete a file and see it go away. Like right now I'm recording in OBS and I hit the start recording button. I want to see that actually works. I want to see that file, that MP4 or whatever I'm recording, appear in the file manager. So just for verification. That's the only time I really need a file manager open. Most of the time, if I'm just moving stuff around or copying stuff, I'm doing it all at the command line. Are you interested in theoretical computer science? I haven't got into any kind of stuff involving CS at all. Don't know anything about computer science, programming, anything like that. Just a desktop Linux user. Didn't go to school to learn anything about computers, I went to college, 25 years ago and, got some degrees in music. I was a music student. I didn't do anything tech related. All right. Do you still use a minimal web browser? I have several different web browsers on the system. And yeah, I do play with them sometimes. The only one that I have stuck with for the long term, and I never see myself ever not having it on the system, I still love Lynx. LYNX, the terminal-based browser. It's so good for certain tasks. If the site you're going to, you don't need images and multimedia and everything. It's just plain text. Lynx is just fantastic. All right, Joe says, DT, I really enjoyed your backyard vlog. Yeah, that was interesting. Yeah, just walking around talking about randomness. I should do that again. We should do some random walking and random talking. Yeah, DT, thanks for showing your thing, or for doing your thing and showing off Linux. Okay, appreciate that. You have influenced a lot of folks, myself included. Thanks, Dennis. Appreciate that, buddy. Yeah. I would say DT is rather an open source fan, not a suckless fan. I like some of the suckless software. I'm not a fan of necessarily the suckless philosophy. I think their software could be better if their philosophy wasn't what it is. I think they hold themselves back in some ways. And I don't think they see it. You know, like the suckless fanboys, I don't think they see it that way. And have you returned to your gym routine, DT? I was in the gym this morning. I got in leg day. But yeah, I started getting back in the gym, about 3 weeks ago or so. Eased into it. You know, you can't just start hitting it heavy again. But now, yeah, I'm back to... I can do what I need to do as far as I can move some weight around. All right. Well, we're going to call that a stream, guys. Somebody had a super chat here I missed. Let's end this with Octavius here. He sends, looks like MX. What is that? I'm not just sure what currency that is. But he says, thanks for these live streams and overall support of the Linux community. Appreciate that, Octavius. Thank you, sir. And Ready Dairy said, yeah, leg day here also. Leg day is the best day. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to go ahead and kill the stream. I hope you guys enjoyed this. And these are always fun, just interacting with you guys in the chat. And especially since I don't interact with you guys that much as far as IRC and Discord and things like that. I can't hang out in those, especially while I'm working. So I do like doing, you know, these kinds of streams, you know, once a month, once every 2 months, doing this kind of Ask DT kind of session here. So, all right, guys, before I go, let me thank some of the patrons here. I'm going to show some names on the screen here. These are my patrons because you guys, the community, help support my work. Without you guys, obviously, this channel wouldn't be possible. I want to sincerely thank each and every one of you guys, and thank you guys for hanging out in the YouTube chat. You guys really made this possible, too. All right, guys. Peace.